Call the roll, please.
Chair Jim Holden.
Present.
Melanie Griffin is not attending. Cliff Manuel.
Present.
Commissioner John Minton is not attending. Commissioner Pat Kemp. Here. Commissioner Rosie Bellamy. He may be joining us via phone. Commissioner Catherine Starkey. Here. Commissioner Karen Seal. Here. Rich McLean is not attending. Commissioner Janet Long.
She is here. I think she's in the facilities.
Mayor Rick Kreisman.
Here.
And Mayor Jane Castor is not attending. Secretary Gwen.
Here.
And we did not hear from Nanny Ann's office.
So we do have a quorum with Commissioner Long.
We do have a quorum.
Okay, before we get started, is there any commissioner that has to leave early today because we have important business to conclude, especially passing the budget? So if that's so, and everyone can't stay, let us know now so we can go ahead and get that done. Otherwise, we can proceed with the normal schedule. Okay, the first order of business is public comment. The chair recognizes Tom Nocera.
Good morning, members of the board and staff of TBARTA. This morning I want to make an update on our progress and also our vendor's progress at SkyTran. I spoke on Tuesday with SkyTran's new president and requested from him an update on their demonstration track. I know that until you have something tangible for people to look at, it's not going to be able to move forward. So I'm able to report that the excavations have been completed for the demo track in San Antonio. The concrete bases have been poured. The steel uprights have been delivered, and the only component that they're now waiting on is the guideway components that need to be welded together to create the guideway for that system. We expect that they're going to have this completed by the end of the year, and we'll be able to, the public that is, will be able to see it right after the first of the year. So it will be tangible, and we'll have a demonstration of their system flying on a closed loop in San Antonio. Meanwhile, this week we attended the Uptown event, and that was the gathering, and we were one of the 6 exhibitors there. And we unveiled at that time our vision for taking the Tampa Bay region from worst to first, and we point to the Times article that identified the Tampa Bay area as having one of the worst transit systems in the United States. We unveiled a project at that meeting also that involves a proposal that we have in front of the University Mall Development Company, RD Management, as well as the University of Florida. I had a few flyers that I left with some of the members, and I've got some more out in my car which I can provide. These were distributed to the public. And my last comments would be having some expertise in aerospace technology. Hyperloop is not something worth much consideration at this point. The gondola system will never be able to serve airports. Of the 3 technologies that you're looking at currently, the Lilium project looks interesting from the standpoint of manned air taxis that could take people right to the airport. They're a modern day version of a helicopter, basically. And the problem with helicopters is they have extremely high maintenance costs. So that forces the ticketing price to be really high. I think of all the technologies out there, the aerial personal rapid transit is by far the best. And that's why we've made a very heavy bet on that as being a solution for the Tampa Bay region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those comments. Next, the chair recognizes Ron Weaver.
Mr. Chairman, I come to thank you for the West Shore Interchange funding and for your magnificent efforts along with those of our community to work hard on the West Shore Interchange. Thank you for that hard work for the West Shore Interchange and advancing that cause with respect to funding the crucial parts of our region and the crucial fulcrum of our region where we connect. I also come to speak about a hearing coming up on November the 5th at 6 p.m. at the second floor of the county center in Hillsborough County in order to deal with the downtown interchange, sometimes called the malfunction junction. And it's a crucial part also in this region that we make sure that we thank the DOT for a $175 million quick fix of that interchange. And while more needs to be done, let's encourage each other as a region to take that crucial link of our regional connectivity in downtown Tampa interchange, the malfunction junction, and to work with the DOT on the $175 million quick fix of that interchange for additional through lanes, especially a second lane for the south movement from USF East over to Orlando, taking only about 8 or 9 properties instead of the 200 that would have been taken by the original grander plan with respect to fixing the downtown interchange in downtown Tampa. On behalf of the business community and on behalf of those who need it for education and to their medicine and to their live, work, and play needs of the downtown interchange, I would encourage you to take that energy you've devoted to the West Shore interchange and others and help us accept from the DOT, rather than the money going somewhere else, the improvements to safety and the improvements to the malfunction junction in order that it might function well again, including it in the 2045 long-range plan, and not having it removed by those who have tried to remove it with respect to neighborhoods, trying to remove the $175 million quick fix of the downtown Tampa interchange in order to get on with the mobility of this region, for which I thank each one of you for your vital part.
Thank you, Ron. Is there anyone else wishing to make public comments? Okay, none being heard, I will close public comment. Next item up is the consent agenda items, which are the prior minutes, September 23rd, or August 23rd and September 27th. Is there a motion to approve? Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye, and it's approved. Next up is the policy committee reports. Rich McLean is excused today, and instead Janet Long will give that report.
What am I doing?
Policy committee.
Policy committee. We met, which we didn't have any discussion, so.
I think the only item is the board calendar.
Correct, which we approved.
The committee did, I think the full board was approved that.
So in your packet, members, you'll see that there's a calendar, and I know that a lot of us, especially on the commissions, don't have a lot of information yet on what our own assignments are going to be as far as boards are concerned. So that's a little problematic, but for purposes of today, I guess we can just go ahead and take a vote, Chair, because
Would you like to make a motion just to?
I would make the motion, and we did approve it at the policy committee, so if you'd like to, I'll make the motion if you can get a second.
Is there a second?
Second.
A motion, second, any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Motion carries. Okay, anything else to report on the policy committee?
No.
Okay, you are still recognized then to give the finance committee report.
The Finance Committee report, I'm excited about being able to talk about because we have an actual cash in the bank position at TBARTA today. And if you've been following along for the last year, we've been working really, really, really hard on that. And we have, one second. We have about $255,000 in the bank. Our bills are paid, and we are moving forward. We've gotten several very prestigious grants from the federal government, and David has done a remarkable job of listing out in the presentation that he gave to us about the accomplishments of TBARTA this year, which I couldn't be more excited about because we're making progress in Washington, D.C., and I look forward to great things coming from TBARTA this year. And since I have the floor, if I can have a point of privilege, Mr. Chair, I would like us all to wish David Green a happy belated birthday. This his birthday was yesterday.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Okay, well, I think we need to go into the operating budget.
Do you want to?
We'll recognize Debbie Leos.
Oh, yeah, because you didn't do that during finance.
Well, good morning, everyone. Debbie Elias, I'm the Chief Financial Officer at PSTA and Staff Resource to TBARTA. I really am very excited to present the TBARTA budget for fiscal 2020. It is a $7.5 million budget, up from a $2.6 million budget in fiscal 19. I look at TBARTA as a valued member of the transit community and an advocate within the Tampa Bay region. When I say valued, I mean they are viable, and in order to be viable, you have to be both fiscally responsible, and the budget for fiscal 20 is balanced. As a matter of fact, TBARTA has been very fortunate to receive an operating assistance grant from the state legislature for this year, and that will help us and go a long way. We need to be actionable in what we are doing. The CAB program, the Commuter Assistance Program, has within the budget for this year to grow the program up to 220 vans. We also have money, $1 million, for innovative and technology projects, which you'll be hearing a little bit more about later. In addition to doing the Regional Transit Development Plan and completing that, and moving forward on the 41-mile BRT, preliminary design and environmental. Leadership is part of being valued. We heard this morning at the Finance Committee an excellent report by the CEO, David Green, on all the accomplishments we have had during the course of this year. We appreciate the leadership you bring to the region. We're united. For optimum transit improvements, we have to be united in all that we do. I think the board here represents that from a regional basis. So we have strong community and government leaders. And we need to be effective, and to do that, we need to be accountable. So the information we are now providing this year has been very timely from a financial aspect, and it allows us to make decisions as we move forward. And of course, TBARTA is extremely dedicated to its new mission. So the $7.5 million budget that we have for TBARTA is really supportive of that mission, provides resources to the organization, the Commuter Assistance Program, the planning work that is being done for the transit vision for Tampa Bay. One of the things that's very important in the Commuter Assistance Program is we have now taken it from a point where most of the grant funds were being used for administrative costs, where it's being used for the actual Commuter Assistance Program. Matter of fact, our budget achievement is 72% of the CAP funding will go to program rather than to administration. So as I mentioned, we've got the completion in this budget for the regional TDP, the preliminary design and environmental for the 41-mile BRT, our state legislative operating assistance, and funding for the innovative transit technology studies. We've also seen increased partner contributions to help match not only the RTVP, but to help grow us financially. So we appreciate all of the different people on the commission who are providing those funds. And what is important is our revenues are now exceeding expenses by $181.2 thousand, allowing for, while not robust, a 9-day reserve. So we have added things, as David mentioned in his presentation this morning. We've done things where we now have improved health plans for all the employees. Salary assumptions are an average of 3% increases going forward. We're using our FTA 5307 money to do some of the improvements in technologies, as well as pay for different expenses. So we really have come a long way in this last year. And with that, I'd entertain any questions on the budget.
Debbie, excuse me, could you go ahead and let everyone know what our goal is with regard to our reserve? Because we did discuss that a little bit.
Right, we had talked about, and Commissioner Starkey had said it's natural for everyone to have, in good practice, fiscal practice, they have a 2-month reserve. So nine days worth of reserve is a long way from that, but that's what we're going to work towards. And also, Secretary Gwynn, just so you know, when I'm looking at that 9-day reserve, I am not counting any of the state money in that. It will be just local, so that we're not dependent on other people.
Terrific, thank you. Mayor Kreisman has a question. Mayor?
Thank you.
You can press it on the side if it's not on.
Oh, it's on. Okay, go ahead.
Looking at the line item, there's a $310,900 item line for advertising marketing. There's under personnel, there's a $86,000 for communications. And under professional services, there's $1 million for marketing. Can you tell me what the difference is and what will be done under each of those lines?
Okay, I'm going to ask Melanie to come up since you're a little bit more into it, but we have marketing for TBARTA as a whole, and then we have marketing for specific programs. And then we have Chris over here, who is our communications director.
Melanie, if you want to start, Rod, do you?
So the marketing, to answer your question, we do have different marketing for the different projects that we work on. For example, there's marketing for the RTP. We also do have marketing just for community services. So I don't have the actual line item right in front of me, but those are kind of separated based on the departments. Under community services, we do have marketing, and under the planning of the RTP, we do also have marketing advertising.
On the professional services, is that outsourcing or is that being done in-house?
For the professional services, that's outsourcing, yes.
Anyone else? Anyone else have a question about the budget? Anyone? No? All right, then, thank you, Melanie.
Full board has to approve the budget.
Thank you. All right, seeing no further questions, is there a motion and a second, please, for the budget?
Well, I'm running this, I have to officially ask for that first.
I thought we were still.
Because you're on the finance, we give you the report.
Okay,
But as chair, I have to ask for the vote. Would you like to make a motion to approve?
I will make a motion to approve the budget.
Is there a second? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Budget carries. Any further report from the finance committee?
Well,
We got,
under the finance committee report, we took up the amendment to the
Right.
executive director's employment agreement, which you brought
and
forward.
I can present that if you like.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, David's employment agreement needs to be modified with a simple amendment allowing him to join the PSTA health benefits plan, so the finance committee approved that, and it's their recommendation that the full board approve that, so.
I move to approve.
Second.
And a motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries.
And you, I don't know, you're going back and forth.
Well, I have to ask for the vote before the board, and you can present the.
All right, Cindy, would you like to come forward and speak to the Ride Match platform software recommendation?
I'm Cindy Raskin, the Director of Commuter Services for TBARTA. I'm going to give you a little bit of background about this Ride Match platform that we use for our commuter services, and then Al will give you details about the procurement and ask for your action item today. So our commuters that want to carpool or vanpool can go online into a web cloud-based system, create a commuter profile, and then potentially match with other people who have a similar commute. Carpool, vanpool, bike pool. We also use this platform to manage our emergency ride home program, which allows up to 4 rides per year home in case of a commute emergency. We had the same platform for about 10 years called Ride Pro, and with the innovations in software that have come out in that time, we thought it was the right time to go ahead and go out to bid. So we did a competitive bid for that program, and then I'll pass it off to Al.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Al Burns, Director of Procurement for PSTA, Staff Resource to TBARTA. Procurement, the action item this morning is recommend approval of a contract with Agile Incorporated for a ride matching platform with a 2-year base term and 3 one-year renewal options for not to exceed value of $240,000. Also recommend authorizing the executive director to exercise the 3 one-year options. Some of the procurement was issued in compliance with TBARTA's rules. It was also posted on TBARTA's website, PSTA's website, and Demand Star. In September, we received 3 proposals, one of which from Agile, Ride Shark, and Ride Amigos. Ride Amigos' proposal was deemed non-responsive. The evaluation committee comprised of 3 staff members of 3 staff members of TBARTA and PSTA's IT director. The ranking of the proposals are inside your packets. We also requested a best and final offer, and we received that best and final offer in October of this year. The proposed contract price is $48,000 for each of the 5 years. The fiscal impact, as noted to Commissioner Kemp this earlier in the Finance Committee, the price is in line with what the previous contract that we had prior to. Ride matching software is on the operating budget for an annual cost of $48,000 to be funded by federal 5307 grant dollars. Once again, Mr. Chair, the recommendation is recommend approval of a contract with Agile for a ride matching platform with a 2-year base and 3 one-year renewal options for a not to exceed amount of $240,000, and recommend authorizing the executive director to exercise the 3 one-year options.
Any questions? None being heard, is there?
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just had a couple questions. I'm just curious about the software, and it's probably a pretty, I'm imagining, 3 companies and one of them drops out. It's probably pretty limited in terms of what kinds of services or what kinds of companies do this type of service. And I was just curious where this company is, where else they have contracts, and where else they're doing this.
Well, Agile does have contracts throughout the U.S. They were previously known as New Ride, and then they rebranded a few years ago. Of special significance, we think that's really going to be great for our commuters, is that they also have a contract with FDOT District 1 and District 5, which are the 2 districts that are contiguous with us. So our commuters will be able to create their profile and potentially match with a carpool or van pool that is going into one of the other 2 districts. So it kind of expands the ability for people to find matches. And then, other places all around the country, we can provide you a list.
I was just curious to know a little bit more about it. Thank you.
Other questions?
I move staff recommendation, Chair.
Second.
Been a motion, a second, any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Ayes have it. Chair recognizes Brian.
Good morning, Brian Rosario, Principal Planner with TBARTA. Before you is an action item. We are asking the board to authorize the Executive Director to execute a task work order under our General Services Consultant contract to do an innovative transit technology feasibility study. Back in July, the board accepted a $1 million appropriation from the legislature to study and develop innovative transit opportunities. In August, we signed the grant agreement with FDOT, so we officially received the money. Staff has been working with our GSC consultant, WSP, to develop a scope of work and a project schedule to do a high-level feasibility study of 3 innovative transit technologies: Hyperloop, aerial gondolas, and air taxis. They have come up with a cost proposal of $220,916.84. Because the board has to approve purchases of $50,000 or more, we are asking the board to authorize the director to execute that task work order.
Any questions for Brian?
I have one quick question that I forgot to ask earlier, Mr. Chair. The money that we've received, I don't know what happened with that thing, it's gone. The money that we've received for this purpose, obviously, a lot more significant than what y'all are spending in this initial contract. And I had asked David earlier if there's other technologies that would be explored after these 3 were viewed. Are we able to continue to use the rest of the state grant to continue this analysis once the feasibility study is done, or is the rest of the money refunded to the state? I mean, what happens to it? How does $1 million and the 220 coincide to conclusion?
The money that we're not spending, which is probably $780,000, is still left on the table. We would still be able to use that for follow-on study.
follow-up studies
Correct.
created from the.
So as we're doing this, I guess what you would, I guess you would almost call it like a phase one. If we come across some other technology that looks like it has promise, then we have that money left over to do follow-up work.
Thank you.
Other questions? Okay, none being heard, I'll entertain a motion to approve the staff recommendation.
Move approval to approve the staff recommendation.
Second.
A motion, a second, any further discussion?
I'll just thank you. I'll just restate my earlier concerns about it. I understand that it's kind of a state task, I guess I could say, that was assigned to TBARTA. But again, I'll just state there's three things here: Hyperloop, air taxi, aerial gondolas. Of the three, two have absolutely no proof of concept. As I said last year with Hyperloop, it was widely noted across the country and all kinds of transit and transportation journals and blogs that Elon Musk did a long-promised demonstration in Los Angeles, which resulted in a mud tunnel that he put the Tesla in, and I think it went 35 miles an hour, and it was widely panned. And so I don't know what you can study in terms of Hyperloop. I mean, there's, as I said before, I suggested maybe a white paper type of exploration done by our staff rather than 240,000. The air taxis, again, I mean, I just looked it up. There's just no proof of concept again, or it doesn't seem like we should be spending our dollars on these kinds of things. And the aerial gondolas have a little bit more currency, and I know you mentioned the Roosevelt Island Tramway and the Portland Aerial Tram. I've been on both of those. I've done trams in several places, and actually gondolas in Medellin, Colombia. But I still think we could do a limited. I mean, it seems like the most on-point system was the one just set up by Disney, which I tried to look up the dollars per mile, and that's private, so they won't do that. It doesn't have air conditioning. There's other issues like that. But at any rate, it just, I mean, when I think about spending 240,000, I know it's a express bus route for a year, which I probably I could see that being a better expenditure. I know this is one time, but I'll just say those concerns because I feel like this is 240,000 that is being spent on, and it seems excessive to me considering that possibility of examining this in any depth.
Thank you, and I think Commissioner Starkey wants to comment.
Well, I haven't done as much research on the Hyperloop, but my understanding is it doesn't only have to be underground, it can be above ground. So, but I will tell you on the air taxis, they're actually functioning overseas in Dubai, and one of our companies here in Pasco County, True Simulations' parent company, Textron, is actively testing it in Texas, and there's a group in Charleston, I believe, and in Europe, there's a huge conglomeration that are working on the model. So I wouldn't want to rule out those kind of innovative technologies that I think are coming.
Okay. Commissioner Long.
Yes, and excuse me, I do know of and have had a Skype meeting with the manufacturers in Germany of Lilium, who has perfected the air taxis. Commissioner, count just for your information, there it is. It's a 5-passenger little drone that carries humans, and right now it carries 5 people, 4 passengers and a pilot with luggage. And in the conversations that they had with us, they are looking for a couple of places to launch their first test programs, and one of them is here in the United States, and they already know that they can go from the roof of Tampa International Airport to downtown St. Petersburg in 6 minutes. I just find that really exciting to think about, and potentially very, very doable in the future. I envision it'll take them another 2 years before they are actively engaged in carrying passengers, because in our area, they would have to work out a lot of mutual agreements with the 5 different airports that we have in Tampa Bay.
We should start.
Yeah, I would hope that as part of this study that we promote and we suggest Tampa Bay being one of the test areas because of the ability to go over the water during the testing. Some of the other areas have, like in Dallas, have constraints because they're flying over heavily populated areas. So I think we have an opportunity here.
I agree.
Yeah, and I will reinforce that. I had a meeting about this at the airport with Joe Apano, and they could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity here for air taxis, principally because of the water and the ability to take a lot of traffic off the road. So, and this, as I understand it, can be deployed in other parts of the world within probably the next year, and it's right around the corner. So the Tampa airport, I know the mayor of Tampa is very enthusiastic about this. I know St. Petersburg is very enthusiastic, and from my own experience, I know developers are actually building buildings in Miami with this kind of pod available to land at, for commuter services, in the airport areas. Of course, FAA has to work out certain details, but that's doesn't underscore the enthusiasm that the community has for it. So,
I would say that I-4 corridor is another opportunity because of that open space down the middle.
Can I just ask another question? In terms of TBARTA doing a feasibility study, I guess it's important to understand a little bit about how this would interact in terms of mass transit and a way that TBARTA would be. I mean, even in the examples, it seems more of a privatized type of, like a cab, Uber, Lyft type of service. I can imagine, although I keep hearing differently, but I have, again, the proof of concept is pretty limited in terms of cost for someone to, for instance, go from TIA to St. Pete or downtown Tampa. Of course, it would be, that would be a great thing. I just wonder about our role in that, and our involvement, but also I think it'd be really important to understand costs, because I can't imagine it being a cost available mass transit at a cost that would be anywhere competitive. It seems to me more of a limited type of service. Even Uber and Lyft are limited and privatized. So I'll just, again.
I would think these are the very topics that the study will vet out and so forth. Do you have any additional comments?
No, I mean, just as I mentioned in the committee meeting, just the context and the background of this earmark. This was an earmark that came to us. This was not an earmark that TBARTA sought out. Someone at the state level wanted a study, a high-level study done of Hyperloop, and I think they were looking for, well, what transportation authority within the state of Florida would be the most appropriate to do this study, and so they came to TBARTA. And from there, the other two technologies, the gondolas and the air taxis, got added into the scope. So that's kind of some of the background of how this all came about.
Mr. Chair, the interesting thing about that thought process is now that we have been engaged and provided the money, we need to take this opportunity fairly seriously, because it's a good opportunity to explore transit options that we are interested in. And my support for the study at this initial level is not because I've picked something in here that I prefer. It's I would like to see the high-level feasibility analysis done so I can actually have facts and figures in front of me to start looking at options. And I'd like to keep our staff's mind open to other alternatives that might be there to provide transit benefits like this. And from my experience, for what it's worth, things that Joe Lupano gets excited about are really good things to look at in a lot of detail. He's been very successful at moving people in and out of our area for a long time in a very small airport. So I'm happy that we've added the other two items. I'm glad we have the money to explore these options, and I'd like to see us take it seriously as something that we look into for these opportunities and others that might provide the same benefit. And I wouldn't support them unless they were fiscally responsible. So,
Members, any other comments? Okay, none being heard, I will There's been a motion, a second, that concludes discussion. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Let the record reflect that Pat voted, next, any other business for the finance committee?
No, we need to record it.
Okay.
Mr. Bellamy's on the phone,
Oh,
so we need to record it.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Commissioner Bellamy, would you like to give your vote on that item?
Council, do we need to take a roll vote for this?
Well, I think it was 6-1, so here's the problem we have, and
I understand.
I have a disagreement about the interpretation of the statute. The statute says that there's 7 votes required. There's a question of whether that means 7 votes or 7 affirmative votes. To me, it doesn't make sense because the statute says that 7 constitutes a quorum and that there's 7 votes required.
Yeah,
So
that's what I would say.
To me, that's 2
7 of us
things.
voted.
Yeah.
What?
7 voted.
I understand that's the same as 7 as a quorum. So that means the statute says the same thing twice, which is contrary to means of statutory construction, you know. The legislature doesn't write things unless they have a different meaning.
Well, they created it, so let them fix it.
Would you also have to have 7
We
no
can't do
votes?
anything.
The way we've always, with the way that we've interpreted and applied it since I've been here, is that it requires 7 affirmative votes.
My understanding is, in conjunction with, it confirms what council says, that we passed, for example, the budget, because there was 7 votes, we're registering one, the negative vote now. If there were other commissioners, if we had 7 votes, we would get it, but since, is Commissioner Bellamy there on the line or not?
We're having some audio issues. This phone doesn't have great audio quality, so
Because if he in
I
fact
don't know if
votes,
he's still
if
on
he
the phone.
votes, then 7 votes would
Yeah.
carry the motion.
Commissioner Bellamy, can you hear me? Are you still on the line? I think he might have hung up after the budget portion.
Commissioner Kim, you recognize.
Thank you. I've stated my objections on the record, so noted. And I'm willing to just, since there seems to be some confusion in this area, I'm willing to just do a yes vote.
All right, let's do that for the sake of the record. Let's call the roll.
Okay. Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Commissioner Pat Kemp,
Yes.
Commissioner Catherine Starkey,
Yes.
Commissioner Karen Seal,
Yes.
Commissioner Janet Long,
Yes.
Mayor Rick Kreisman.
Yes.
Okay.
And Mr. Chair, it might be a good idea when we do have people, since there is a difficulty with the phone, when you're taking a vote, we could maybe just, if we have somebody join by phone, just do a
Absolutely.
call so that we can record. Because
And-
Jennifer has to record a vote for everybody that's participating.
And, Mr. Chair, can I also ask our attorney or Natalie or somebody to get clarification on the confusion with regard to the attorney telling us something and a few of us up here, a couple of us are former legislators are not agreeing with that. Can you clarify that, get somebody to clarify that for us, please?
I'm pretty sure that's the rule in the legislative history. They wanted to make it a minimum, 7 votes had to pass anything on the board.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be 7 affirmative votes.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
6-1 is 7 people voting, which
No,
is a
no,
quorum vote.
7 votes have to approve of a motion, as I understand it. Council, I think was.
Is that, I mean, the way the sentence reads is it requires, it says that, and I'll read the exact, I've got the statute pulled up.
It says 7 votes, it doesn't say 7 affirmative votes.
Right, but you have to read it in context. It says 7 members of the board shall constitute a quorum, and the vote of 7 members is necessary for any action to be taken by the authority.
We did that, 7 people voted. Doesn't say how that results of the vote.
So the
I never heard
problem is that 7 members of the board shall constitute a quorum. That requires 7 voting people. If somebody abstains, that doesn't count towards the quorum. So to me, that's,
But a
the statute's
6-1
saying the same thing twice.
Mayor Gotcha.
It's a confusing sentence.
So what I would ask is that we have our lobbyists seek out clarification from the legislature if that was the intent, that it be 7 votes that have to be affirmative. If that's the case, we might want to advocate for that being changed, because it's basically requiring, if you've got 7 as a quorum, unanimous vote on everything.
Yeah.
I don't know that, I can't
Other than
imagine.
if there were,
That
correct,
doesn't even
other
make
than if there were.
It doesn't make sense.
Yeah,
What if
I
it's
can't imagine
4-3?
that's the intent.
5-2,
Um,
yeah.
It
So,
doesn't make sense.
I don't know.
Plus, it worked in the reverse. I mean, if we all were against something and one person voted for it, it wouldn't count. It's not just affirmative.
Well, then no action will be taken,
Okay. No action taken.
right? So.
So it's the same thing.
I don't agree with that. I think Commissioner,
I'm certainly not opposed to clarity on this, and by all means, but.
Thank you, Chair Natalie King with RSA Consulting. We'll be happy to go back to both House, Senate, and the Governor's Office legal staff as appropriate to review when the intent was put in place, their definition. We'll bring that back to you in writing.
thank you.
Thank you.
And that was the interpretation that was also given by your prior counsel. Really, that was.
Well, in any event, this underscores the need for, to have a quorum present and as many people as possible, and I think.
Thank you.
But I'm all for getting this clarified, because it's certainly less than clear.
Mr. Chair, I have a quick question.
Or everyone has to vote.
Where everyone's gonna have it,
Yes, Kathy?
Mr. Zimick, I know you are an attorney for many different boards. Have you ever heard of that interpretation in any other board, or is that specific to this board?
I've never
I've
seen
never
that.
heard of that board interpretation before.
It's not an interpretation, I mean, interpretation, I've never seen that language in any other statute establishing a special.
Yeah, I think that's in this board. Okay.
I've
We
never
got
seen
it.
that.
There was a huge dispute, if all of us remember, when this legislation was created between Senators Latvala and Brandis, and I believe my recollection and understanding of this was what was struck. You know, that you had to get something done by this board, you had to have 7 affirmative votes. And that was the insistence of one of those. You guys can be the judge of who it might have been at the
Well,
time.
I think it's an unintended consequence.
Maybe, yeah.
So
Well,
clarification,
if that's true, we'll get quick clarification.
or maybe not.
All right, thanks. Okay, moving on, Chair recognizes Cliff Manuel for the legislative subcommittee report.
And what I'm going to do is recognize Brian Pissarro again to start off our discussion on the dialogue related to the administrative services we've been providing the CCC.
Hello again. State law requires TBARTA to provide, quote, administrative support and direction, unquote, to the MPO Chairs Coordinating Committee. However, the law is silent on how that's to be accomplished. Since 2013, the way we've done it is through a staff services agreement that we sign on a rotating annual basis with one of the member MPOs. They give us $30,000 to offset our labor costs. As you know, in 2017, the legislature changed the mission and geographic scope of TBARTA. We're no longer a transportation authority, we're now a transit authority. We no longer have Sarasota and Citrus County in our service area. Because of these changes, the CCC MPO, that's a mouthful, staff directors, and TBARTA staff have agreed that a transition of MPO regional coordination responsibilities back to the MPOs would be beneficial to both of our entities. And I say a transition back because the CCC actually predates TBARTA. The CCC was created back in 1993. So we are going back to the way things used to be. What we have agreed to is that going forward, TBARTA will continue to use our website to post meeting notices, agendas, and meeting materials for CCC, with the MPO staff directors being responsible for the content. We will continue to make TBARTA's conference rooms available for the CCC staff directors meeting and for the other committee meetings. However, like I said, the staff directors and their staff, they will resume responsibility for preparing the agendas and meeting materials. And then finally, TBARTA with staff, we will continue to attend the meetings to provide direction on issues related to regional transit. So as a result of these changes, there will no longer be a need for the member MPOs to give TBARTA $30,000 a year to offset our labor costs because they are taking responsibility for that. And like I said, so this is an information item.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions for Brian? What we're recommending to the board to vote on today from the legislative committee is the direction to modify Florida statutes to also include what's been recommended here, because what we have right now is the Florida statutes related to our administrative services for the CCC require that service to be provided. We've now entered into a negotiation to modify that agreement with the CCC, and we would like for our legislative support to recognize that change and also modify Florida statutes to reflect the same condition. So we wanted to include that in our legislative work and request today, and that requires board action.
Since you're chair of the legislature, why don't you make a motion then to that effect since you're chair of the legislature?
I would move that we include in our legislative ask this year that we modify Florida statutes, I think it's section 343.922, to reflect the change where the administrative services would no longer be provided by TBARTA for the CCC.
Been a motion, a second, any discussion?
If I could add a comment, it would go a little bit beyond just removing administrative services. It would actually separate all reference of the CCC being a committee of TBARTA and taking that out of the statute as well.
And I include that in my motion. Thanks for the clarification.
Motion, second, any further discussion? Commissioner Kim.
Thank you. I just, probably don't need to do this, but I'd just like to say it makes a lot of sense for streamlining, I think, mismatched bureaucracies, and I think it's a wise move.
Other question? Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
We also have two other items, Mr. Chair. We also discussed in the legislative committee the legislative ask that we have currently before them to consider where board members can participate in our board meetings electronically. And during that discussion, we also were concerned that our committee structure that we have in place today be allowed the same benefit of electronic participation in committee meetings in order to establish a quorum so that we can conduct business. There was quite a bit of discussion back and forth about whether we should include both the board and the opportunity for the board itself to participate electronically, and then also extend that benefit to the committee level. The legislative committee recommends to the board that our ask include both the board and the committee structure being able to participate electronically in order to establish a quorum, and then our board chairman, Holton, establish guidelines and policies locally, if that legislation is approved, that would govern how we participate and what our participation requirements would be.
Yeah, there's a little bit of background there. Natalie, can you brief us, as you did the committee, the full board, on the back and forth with the legislative folks?
Happy to do so. Again, Natalie King with RSA Consulting. Currently, we have for the policy bill, the bill sponsors in the House and Senate will be respectively Representative Diamond and Representative Rasan. In talking with them, as currently proposed, the legislation changes would allow for the board to have electronic communications to meet quorum needs. That electronic communication is not specifically limited to just a phone call. That could be inclusive of also other electronic methods such as Skype and webinar type of technology. With this, we will go back and make the request to also be inclusive of the committee structure as well, but it's with the condition that from the legislative champions that we have, that be a provision be limited to approval through the board chairman, so that it does not become the norm. There is a sensitivity to making sure that our meetings are continuing to be accessible to the public and that our members are accessible to the public, and so that is not the standard normal operating procedures. Is there anything further you'd like me to expand upon?
No, unless there are any questions by members for that. Thank you. if you want to put that in the form of a motion.
I would recommend to the board as a motion for y'all to consider that we ask that our legislative policies be modified to allow both the board and our committee structure to participate electronically in order to establish a quorum.
Second.
A motion, a second, any further discussion? All those in favor,
I just share, I'll just say, I truly share those concerns with regards to public access when it's online and the difficulties of that. I listened to the first two meetings as I was driving here before the Finance Committee meeting and had difficulty. I barely gleaned what was being said, and I thought it was difficult. I understand the difficulty of meeting over a region like this, but I think it's part and parcel of it, and perhaps there might be some other ways that it could be done, like maybe quarterly meetings or, something like that. I think it would be unwise for the board itself to have such a thing, but did you say something too about the exception, or that it would be a
No, as I understand it, the general consensus of the legislature is that this should be the exception, not the rule, so they are going
in terms of TBARTA's board, not in
Yes.
terms of our
Yes.
specific meetings?
Yes, yes.
I've got it.
Yes, so, and then the chair will promulgate with staff's help, policies that govern, exemptions, and it's not the intent to be very liberal and let everyone just call in. It's to having certain circumstances where someone has a excused absence or a conflict or whatever, that they can call in to constitute a quorum. Should be the exception, not the rule, and that's the preference of the legislature.
I just, even today, we had difficulty on that one vote. I just think it's problematic. I think there's a reason that it exists.
There is, certainly, and I think the most compelling reason is public access and public participation here. So to your point, well taken, and we're trying to strike a reasonable balance. Okay, so, any other,
Was there a motion and a second?
motion second?
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes.
No. I'm opposing it.
Well, then we're back in the same spot.
With this vote too?
Yeah.
All those? I was,
Okay, call the roll, please.
Can I want for a little bit additional discussion?
Sure.
Since we've talked about it a lot, and she didn't have that. The interesting thing about what we're asking the legislative body to do is to provide a convenience for the board to use in order to establish a quorum under extenuating circumstances. We're not asking them to open the door up, and we have to trust ourselves and the chairman to elect policies that we get to vote on about how we're going to use this flexibility. So just because they provide us the flexibility doesn't mean that it has to be abused. He can set the policy and the board can adopt that policy that it can only be done 2 times a year or under extreme circumstances. We get to set those rules once we've been provided the opportunity to set them. But today we can't even consider it when we need a quorum. And we've had times where phone participation from someone that maybe is on vacation or gone or not able to attend would have made a big difference in our ability to make a recommendation to the board if we couldn't otherwise. So that's why I like the flexibility of the legislative body not restricting this issue for us, and then back to the board and the board chairman and our own policies for creating this opportunity for us to participate electronically in unusual circumstances.
Other members?
I might just say if maybe we could legislatively restrict that with that specific language, like no more than 2 meetings a year or something like that specifically. I'll go along. I feel uncomfortable. I feel like it's a slippery slope. I don't mind it as much with committee meetings, but committee meetings, you can hear the discussion. And it's even whether you pass it or not. I mean, you just comes to the point of it is getting a discussion, so the vote isn't, in my mind, that significant on the committee meetings at any rate. And so I feel some more level of comfort with the committee meetings. I would be willing, if you want to add into that, something of no more, that we would, or that there could be no more than 2 meetings a year under circumstances.
David had a comment too.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A point of clarification is that this conversation was already taken up a few months ago. I believe it was at the August meeting, and the lobbyist was authorized to proceed with 2 items for the agenda. One was requesting that the mayors of Tampa and St. Pete be given the authority to appoint designees to attend in their absence, and the other was for board members to attend electronically. So this conversation has already been approved by this board. What we're talking about now is the change of allowing the committee members also to have that electronic access. And if you don't want to take that up today, that's fine, but having board members vote electronically and attend electronically has already been advanced by the board.
I agree with you on that. I think that Natalie came back and said the legislature wanted to add somewhat of clarification to that. And I think what's happening now is Commissioner Kemp and others are remarking that maybe we want to negotiate a little bit with the legislature if that's possible. Natalie, you recognize again to give us your expert opinion on this.
Thank you, Chair. Natalie King with RSA Consulting. I'm not sure if it's expert, but I'll do my best.
You're recognized as such.
The language that was originally proposed and has gone to bill drafting and is being filed is specifically to the board. It does not have any specific limitations or prescriptive language as to the purview of this board and the chair to promulgate the rules. It would be our advice and counsel to maintain control over your rulemaking and not ask the legislature to prescribe to you how you will manage this. I think that flexibility is essential to you, and it's what we've heard from you over the last several months. Adding the committee structure is something we can definitely take to them. It's a conversation we have had, but we can definitely revisit that. It was not something that was picked up by the legislative body when we originally talked with them. But what I would suggest is that with adding the language that they have proposed back to us, and this is part of the negotiation process, is they have more comfort if there is a provision that has it so that the board chair has to approve to allow for the flexibility, but also providing a backstop so that there is not a kind of going forward normalization of not in-person attendance. So I think that that has been thoughtfully addressed, and I think that there is confidence that the local board has the ability to manage that. So we obviously would be able to, if it's the will of this board, to go back and request further limitation, further prescriptive language, but that's not been the intent. I think they do want backstops, but I think they have confidence and trust in this board to manage the business of the board. Is there anything further you'd like me to expand upon?
No, other than if other members have questions. Commissioner.
Thank you. And this is no reflection on this board at this time, but I mean, this is a permanent type of undertaking that we would do for this exception. And I have concerns, and so I would be willing to go forward if we did include in there some kind of, I realize the difficulties of that, but some kind of, in the legislative act, I mean, we've had other much more restrictive things in the legislative acts, I think, to include that this be a limited option, no more than 2 meetings a year or something like that. I would be willing to vote on it today if that's needed. And again, as I said, I'm okay with the committee meetings, but I think the committee meetings quorum just isn't that significant in that, it can all come forward, and whether a committee supports it or not, I don't think that that's.
One solution I would offer is I am happy to agree to promulgate that rule as a local rule of TBARTA. I don't know whether we need to ask the legislature further impose restrictions on us. Is that acceptable to you, Commissioner?
If we did that right now?
Well, I agree to I'm happy to share with the board. rely heavily on staff and happy to bring it to board approval.
Mr. Chair, I have one, while you're thinking. So you just said, if they are going to push back to us that they want the chair in this legislation to create these local rules and establish a backstop. Backstop being it can't be misused. I mean, that's coming from them to us, the way I understood what you just said.
Correct. So it was, the feedback we received when we made our initial proposal was it was their desire to clearly put in within the intent that it was not to be used as a normal operating, function, that there is a goal and desire to have in-person attendance to the extent possible, and only in an extraordinary circumstance would the chairman have the opportunity to approve on request that exemption to the rule.
And then to David's point, as we're continuing with this potential vote, and I might have to modify my motion, but the direction has already been established by the board and provided to you to provide that benefit to the full board. So the only thing that we're considering right now is to extend the same benefit that we previously voted on that's currently in the legislation to ask for the committee structure.
Correct.
Because I want Commissioner Kemp to understand we are talking just about committees today. The board has set sail. And then one other question while on it, and I'll recognize it, let the chair recognize everybody else. You mentioned the mayors. The mayors can appoint a person to fulfill their obligation for establishing a quorum on their behalf here at the board. Is that limited to other elected officials, or is it limited at all, or it could be, can a mayor, is there any restrictions on who the mayor can appoint to be his representative on TBARTA? I was curious about that.
Sure. At this time, as drafted and is to be filed, it would not prescribe or limit the mayors as to whom they would appoint. It would be at their discretion.
Recognize Mayor Kreisman to comment on this.
I apologize. It's a member of the city council. So it has to be a surrogate from the council.
It does have to be a surrogate.
Yes, sorry. I apologize for that.
The only, and that's really following up on what Cliff was saying, the only, from a process standpoint, what it seemed to me is that if, let's say, there was a push to include language today that specifically asked the legislature to limit to 2 times, and that did not pass by 7 votes, the board has already approved moving forward for the entire board, so that would still be happening regardless. So,
yes.
Yeah, so it's really, I feel like we ought to probably be limiting our discussion to solely about adding the committee structure to this opportunity.
And the committee structure, for those of us that, I agree we can't vote and bind the board to anything, but it is beneficial to have a forum and committee structure so that we can actually have a reason for being there to make a recommendation. Without a forum, we can't do anything but just say, we talked about it. So it is nice to have that same benefit established for committees so that in those extenuating circumstances, we could establish a forum to make a recommendation to the board when we needed to. So my motion that I made earlier does not include anything that we've already done being undone. I'm asking the board to consider whether the committee that the committees that the chairman has established on behalf of the board can also establish a forum electronically, similar to the prior direction we provided them for the full board. That's my motion.
And what's that?
Is that a clarifying motion? Clarifying. I just want to make sure that we're not unraveling anything we've already accomplished.
Okay, and a motion, a second. Any further discussions or comments?
I'll just say I understand the context of it. I did object prior when we had these discussions before with the full board. And so this is I'm consistent with that, but as I said, I don't have the issue with the committees.
Okay, so based on the motion, please call the roll.
Jim Holton,
Yes.
Cliff Manuel,
Yes.
Pat Kemp,
Yes.
Catherine Starkey. Yes. Karen Seal.
Yes.
Commissioner Janet Long.
Yes.
Mayor Kreisman.
Yes.
And we have nobody on the phone.
Nobody's on the phone, so motion passes 7-0.
Then I had one other item. The last item we discussed in the legislative committee was, it's brought to our attention that there's been some recent discussions back and forth between TBARTA and the current mayor of Clearwater. I think David also has participated in some of those discussions and may want to highlight some of the things that he has learned as well. But the legislative committee felt, because of the regional benefits of the structure of the Clearwater office area, that they should be considered for potential involvement in the TBARTA board. And we wanted to recommend to the board or have the board discuss the benefits of that possible inclusion and whether we'd like to reach out to them for a board seat. David, did you have anything else you wanted to add or correct from that?
No, I don't. Just, I haven't had any conversations with anybody in Clearwater about them becoming part of the board or their interest in becoming part of the board at all. It was very basic orientation type conversations about who TBARTA is, what we do, those sorts of things.
Thank you.
And I want to underscore this motion is about investigating this process, not making a substantive recommendation at this time, because as council pointed out, we would then have an even number of board members which could present obvious voting issues. And I'm sure others want to weigh in. Commissioner Kim.
Thank you. Again, I'll just say that I feel like it puts too much emphasis in one area, Pinellas County. I feel very unrepresented in Hillsborough, being the largest population in the region, and felt that way. So I'll just say on that, I mean, it just seems like we should do that in other places too, or could always say that. So I feel like the representation from Pinellas should be adequate.
Others want to comment on that? Okay, we have a motion to that effect.
Well, from the legislative committee's perspective, the reach out for discussion purposes is recommended. So I'll make a motion for the board's consideration that we authorize staff to engage in dialogue with Clearwater to see if they should become part of our regional transit discussions. I don't think we need to make the motion so specific that a board seat would be offered even. I think we got to start a dialogue before we get to thinking about board seats. So we'll make it at that level.
So we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Mr. Chair, and then I have a comment because I clearly understand the comments made by Commissioner Kemp. However, is not our board member Rich McLean from Hillsborough County as well?
Yes, but he is from Hart.
Okay, well, I'm from PSTA, so I mean, kind of the same thing.
Okay. Motion is second and discussion. You want to make some further comments?
No, I just wanted to clarify what I thought.
And Chair Holton, where are you from?
I am from Pinellas,
But
but I have lived in Hillsborough as well, and I may be back and forth.
Well, I feel like Commissioner's paying a little, because you have Tampa and Hillsborough and Hart on the board, and I have only me. So I am hoping that the governor's appointment will be from Pasco County, so we have another voice. But at least you've got three. I've got one.
Good point, Commissioner.
Yeah.
Commissioner Seal.
Was this and I may have missed that, was this initiated by the mayor of the city of Clearwater, or where did this come from?
I brought it up, Commissioner Seal, because I've had conversations, well, Bill and I just spoke about it, and Mayor Hibbert, who is running from, or former Mayor Hibbert, and I can't remember who else was in that conversation, but there were several elected officials in the conversation, including a couple of legislators who thought it was a great idea and wanted to just explore a discussion.
I mean, I realize that Clearwater has a lot of transit and transportation problems, so I understand it from that viewpoint. But I do concur. So county have their major city have their major city event. I just, I want it to be fair to all, and that's where I would be coming from. So, if you maybe you look at setting up another committee that consists of some of the other elected officials when we get to the point where we're really doing some robust projects. Maybe there's a different way of looking at this so that we're inclusive, but that we don't become a 21-person board.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and this is with all due respect to my friends in the city of Clearwater. I agree with Commissioner Seal. I think that there was an intention by the legislature when this board was established to look at having county representatives, but then have someone from the two largest cities represented. And so, you know, I look at Clearwater's population versus Largo or Seminole versus Temple Terrace, and where do you start drawing that line, and then your board becomes so large, as the commissioner was saying, that it becomes unmanageable. I do think that process makes more sense when we start getting into some real substantive decisions on where things are going to be done and when they're going to be added, to look at maybe involving those folks at a subcommittee level to bring back to the full board.
Commissioner Kent.
Yes, I'd just like to say too, just by way of clarification, I look at it very much as being population-based, and with all due respect again, Hillsborough County we're getting close to 1.5 million people, Pinellas County has about 1 million, Pasco has 500,000.
560.
So I can see these being those, the representation being matched to population and being matched to also where that infrastructure is going into, and where the connections are being made. I think, make a good argument that maybe Plant City, for instance. I know others don't think of that, but I can see it being growing and being a very central place. So I just think it would be unwise to move in this direction at this time. But I appreciate Commissioner Seals. I mean, I think there might be, when there's more robust or specific involvement, or even just a committee out there to hear things from, on occasion, ask a meeting of the other communities to find out if there's specific interests or needs or something that TBARTA should have a connection with in those communities.
Mr. Chair, one of the greatest benefits of board feedback is you learn as you're listening. And in my opinion, based on a couple of things, one, this wasn't an agenda item that we had on for discussion. It's not in the legislative or the board agenda. I think it'd be wise for us to ask staff to look into it, maybe just like consensus. I don't even think it requires a board vote, and come back with some thoughts for us to consider through another committee structure as to whether the benefits outweigh the negatives for this opportunity. I'd be glad to change that.
Yeah, I concur with that, and a lot of your arguments are compelling here in terms of overall fairness, and point well taken, and we probably should not be in the position of second guessing the wisdom of the legislature. They had a reason for doing this in the first place. So
we want them to be happy. Happy legislators.
So do you withdraw the motion?
I am.
Is there any other business then from the legislative committee?
There's not.
Okay, none being heard, we'll move on to the next item. Chair recognizes Bill Johnson.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I concur that we want happy legislation. The Citizens Advisory Committee met on October 16th at the Pasco Office of American Consulting Professionals. We had a quorum of 11 out of our 16 members. The CAC received an update on Vision 2030 from the Tyndall Oliver's Ball. The purpose of the purpose of this agenda item was for the CAC to develop a set of responses to the peer review questions. Those are the questions that were proposed to you at last month's TBARTA board meeting. the questions that you will be discussing at your November board workshop. We have 3 consensus recommendations for your consideration. One, that TBARTA's main goal should be on bringing additional funds to the table for transit in this region. 2, that the agency be positioned more in a planning role rather than being the actual operator of the transit service. And third, the TBARTA should take the lead in developing a regional brand for the various transit agencies in the area. The second major subject of the meeting was the regional rapid transit PB&E's goals and objectives. The agenda purpose was to agree on a set of goals and objectives to reach the RRT's primary purpose, the purpose of providing frequent all-day rapid transit that is quick, safe, and reliable. With regard to the project's purpose statement, the comment was made that defining the term all day to include only the hours of 6 a.m. to 12 a.m. may be too restrictive for those going to and from shift work. With regard to the project's proposed objectives, the group supported the substitution of the word regional for the word bus in the project description, RRT instead of BRT. The project is about mobility, mobility in quotes, instead of specific technology. The CAC agreed that reliability and predictability to the destination are the key goals of the project, of the proposed project. It is appropriate to describe the project brand with terms such as modern, advanced, and mobility. Words do matter. The CAC collectively developed a list of additional project objectives: affordable commuting option, or perhaps workforce cost-attainable mobility. Second one is to minimize or avoid future road congestion. Third is promote and sustain green, clean energy initiatives. Fourth, reduce the need for or demand for personal vehicles where possible. The fifth, convenient accessibility for the transition to the final link to home or work locations. And six, to encourage joint public-private development, or P3s, along the corridor. And I distributed, or had your staff distribute, a copy of the flip chart that was used in that brainstorming session for your reference. We started to discuss also how we could improve the role of the Citizens Advisory Committee in its purpose of providing regional-oriented advice to you, the board. And we plan on continuing to look at ways that we can provide value to your decision-making process. We received an update on the CCC proposed changes, but you've already approved that, so we won't tell you that we recommended approval on that. Lastly, we discussed the possibility of TBARTA providing van pool service in Manatee County. In response to that, staff reported that TBARTA can provide van pool service to any county in Florida so long as the vehicle starts and stops in FDOT District 7. So, however, our marketing and outreach are limited to District 7, so the exposure to Manatee residents is very limited. That's the report of our committee.
Thank you, Bill. Any questions for Bill? Thank you very much for that report. There was no Transit Management Committee report meeting. The chairman's report, I'll be brief. I would just want to emphasize that everyone as we made some legislative asks to reach out to their legislative delegation as well and try to reinforce what we're doing here to keep the good work going as we move through the legislative session. And thank Natalie, you and your team for such a great job in keeping us briefed and getting things going up there in a positive way. Appreciate that. We'll take the presentations now. I know Brian wanted to make some introductory remarks prior to bringing Scott up.
Can we stop on number 7 for just a second?
Well, we're going to take number 7 as at the end, rather than
Okay.
do the presentations now. And believe me, it should be next to the adjournment.
Brian Pissarro with TBARTA staff. I'm the staff project manager for the PD&E study of the Regional Rapid Transit. What you're going to hear today is an update on the station area analysis. The Regional Transit Feasibility Plan identified 21 station areas. We want to narrow that number down. Scott Pringle and Jack Gonzalez from WSP are here. They're going to talk about the analysis that they've done. That analysis has included both quantitative as well as qualitative data. As Scott will mention, we've gotten some really good feedback from the business community, as well as from city and county land use planning staff, and also from our own Citizens Advisory Committee. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Scott.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, board. Scott Pringle with WSP. As Brian introduced, I'm going to give you an update where we are with the Regional Rapid Transit Project. This is the schedule you see before you. I do want to tell you today, I'm very happy to announce that we're making great progress on the project. We're actually quickly closing in on completing our first milestone. So this morning, almost afternoon, I'm going to give you a quick progress update on where we are. And then ideally, we'd like to come back at your next board meeting in November, and we will have 5 alternatives that we'll be recommending to the board to carry into the next stage, that second milestone, which is 10% design. And within those alternatives, what will be included is the conversation about stations, which I'm here to talk to you about today, as well as how we connect those stations and move those alternatives into 10% design. So before we get started, I do want to do a quick update on public outreach. Without actually even having a major outreach effort yet, which we are planning for the end of this year, you can see the stats here. We've already almost seen 100 views of the video that we presented to you in August, and a number of website hits, and of course we expect this to increase dramatically as we actually get to the point where we're announcing outreach efforts. So as Mr. Johnson noted, we did have a great meeting with your Citizens Advisory Committee, and I won't repeat a lot of the information that Mr. Johnson did provide, but the benefit of having that conversation is we really were able to hone in on exactly the purpose for this project, really focusing on that all-day modern mobility that is quick, safe, reliable, frequent, and provides regional rapid service. And the reason I bring this up is that as we go through these milestones, as we keep vetting out these different evaluations and the technical information, we're going to constantly reflect back on that purpose and make sure that any recommendations coming forward are in alignment with that purpose and those objectives that the CAC discussed last week. So these are the objectives that Mr. Johnson mentioned. Again, I won't read them verbatim, but we do have them here documented. As you can see, mobility, advanced technologies for both vehicle and fare, health benefits, workforce affordable housing, premium transit services that reduce and avoid congestion, as well as lowering commuter traveling costs, and first mile solutions that encourage economic development. So that's a quick summary. Again, I think Mr. Johnson did a great job of covering those objectives. Purpose being, as we go through each step of the technical evaluation, we'll always, as your team, reflect back on those goals and objectives. So, we get to talk about where we are with the stations. So we actually get into some of the fun stuff. It's our first major step in moving towards the completion of that milestone. As you all remember, during the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan, we had a number of questions that came up, both from public outreach and from our different stakeholders. And one of those key questions were, okay, 21 stations, where are these stations? What do these stations look like? and what is the appropriate number of stations to carry forward into the next process. So we took on that first question. How many stations should be included as we move this project forward? And what that really does is, by understanding the number of station areas, it allows us to then begin to really focus on some of the details within each one of those station areas. Now, to be clear, for a point of clarification, we're calling these station areas. So this is an area that's about a mile wide or a half-mile radii, where a station can be located anywhere within this bubble, as it were. So we're focusing on those 21 bubbles. And once we understand where those priorities are, then the next steps from a station perspective is we get to start getting into the conversation about actually what types of stations are these? Are these stations that have a platform in the middle of the interstate? Is it something that has access immediately adjacent to the interstate? Or is it something that's maybe 2 or 3 blocks actually into a neighborhood at street level? And we call this next step identifying the station typology. So again, we need to know the number of stations that we're going to look at, and then we can start digging into the type of the typologies of each one of those stations. And I know here today you have Ms. Sabia, Terrence Sabia, is going to talk about TOD best practices, and I think it's a great opportunity, and I'm really happy to see that she's here to talk to you today about TOD, because as we're defining those typologies, which will be coming in the next couple of months, that's an excellent opportunity to take the information that she's going to bring forward to you and really integrate that into what we're doing at the station level. So beyond that, identifying those station areas, getting the number right, allows us to start defining what the types of stations they are and where they're located, but it also really helps us on the other side to figure out, well, how do we actually connect these dots? How do we connect these dots along the corridor? What type of alignment is it? Is it 100% dedicated lanes? Is it some other combination of that as we move forward into 10% design? So we did quite a robust technical evaluation. We did a 3-step process, which I'll walk through with you today. But I do, again, want to reflect on what Brian mentioned to you. We had some amazing input from all your land use staff professionals across the 3-county area. For example, we had directors from the cities and the city planning departments. We had Ford Pinellas, Mr. Blanton was representing Ford Pinellas. Ms. Ornita from Hillsborough Planning Commission, director as well, was highly engaged in these conversations. And because of that, we had some really great dialogue, and I'm going to walk you through that today. We also met with the what we're calling our business working group. So this that has wide representation across the 3-county area. It includes a number of chambers, whether it's the city of Tampa or St. Pete or the host of other chambers that are out there. Economic development corporations, the EDCs, as well as regional agencies like the Tampa Bay Partnership are also represented. So all the information that you're seeing here today has actually been presented to those 2 working groups. And again, it was both this combination of what we're seeing on the data side, the technical side, in concert with what we're hearing from your stakeholders. And that's where we're coming forward with this progress update and give you an idea of where we're heading in these number of station areas. So, again, a quick point of reminder or clarification. I know I just had a conversation about this with this board in August, but what we are talking about here with this project, it is unique. It is something that is really at the forefront of how we modernize and provide modern mobility along our interstate infrastructure across the entire United States. And it is very different than what you would see from an arterial BRT, which is something that operates at street level, and its stations are approximately half-mile to a mile apart. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, those express bus services that we have operating here today in Tampa Bay, they have much longer distances between their stations, and they're really focused on moving people during the rush hour and getting people to these destinations. We're actually stuck right in the middle of those 2 bookends. We're actually looking at something that not only is frequent and provides all-day service like an arterial BRT, but it is more commuter-based. So our station spacing, you'll see, is more in the range of 2 to 3 miles between stations, because our purpose is to provide access to jobs, provide that commuter regional service, just like the CAC identified and Mr. Johnson identified. So, step number 1 in our process, We met with our land use working group, again, all those individuals that I mentioned before, and the first thing we did is we defined what are our must-have stations for this project. And it was pretty clear cut. It was the key activity centers across the 41-mile corridor, and the must-haves, I'll read them off to you in order. There are 2 in downtown St. Petersburg, 4th Street near Tropicana. From that, we have a station, must-have station in Carillon, West Shore, downtown Tampa, the USF area, and State Route 56 in Pasco. So right from the beginning, we said, we're going to take these off the table. We absolutely are going to move these stations forward. And so the question is, okay, what do we do with the remaining stations out of the 21 recommended from the Regional Transit Feasibility Plan? In this same step, we also met in conversations with the land use professionals. You know, we had a really great conversation about, okay, well, we know we want to get closer to that 3-mile station spacing. Are there any stations of the 21 that we can go ahead and remove now for a whole host of reasons? Maybe they're not physically viable based on their understanding of plans and efforts that are going on in their individual communities, or, you know, is it just some station, for example, a great example of that is in the Toy Town area, where it may be still another 10, 20 years before you have good connectivity at the local level to make that station work. So we actually were able to remove 9 right off the top. I will list them to you here. We had 3 proposed stations in downtown St. Petersburg. So with having 4th Street and Tropicana Field, the group was very comfortable with moving 8th Street, so focusing on 2 stations in downtown St. Petersburg. I mentioned Toy Town, and that it might be a great opportunity, but it's going to be a long-term opportunity versus something that's available to us now. As we move across the bay to Hillsborough County, Howard, Armenia, and North Boulevard, there's a lot of great local service that's already being planned and provided in those areas. And we also have to be cognizant of our partnership with the department and what they're doing on the modernization of the interstates. And from an engineering feasibility standpoint, it would be very difficult to provide station access at those two locations. So the group is very comfortable removing those. And then moving forward north of downtown Tampa, similar thing, where we know there's a lot of opportunities for service at the local level. Again, our focus is regional service. A lot of opportunities at the local level at Hillsborough Avenue, a lot of engineering constraints involved, historic resources. So these are the 5 that we took off. So we have the 7 must-haves, 5 that we removed in this first step. And what that left us with is 9 stations. So from that, we went to step number 2. So in that next step, we asked the question, okay, regardless of the location of these stations, what's the right number of stations? Is it 7? Is it 21? What makes sense, not because of its position in the region, but what is the most efficient and what has the greatest performance for this project? And the way we went about discussing that and evaluating that is with these 3 criteria that you see up in front of you. We looked first and foremost at the cost effectiveness of this project. Because at the end of the day, the goal is to seek federal funding to get this project implemented. And if we're not competitive in that criteria, we don't have a project to take to the federal government. So we looked at that first. Second, we looked at the details in the ridership and started evaluating different trends in the ridership data to decide what kind of information or what kind of points that we can glean from that. And thirdly, we looked at a cost-benefit ratio of providing those stations in regards to the amount of ridership that you're getting from it. So in this slide is that technical information using those 3 criteria, and I'm just going to quickly summarize those. So when we look at the full 16 stations, which is removing the 5, we first looked at a combination of 7 all the way up to 11. And the reality is that less than 11 stations, we're not necessarily going to be cost effective because we don't have the ridership we need to put a project forward to federal government. However, from 12 stations up to 16, now we're well within that range, that striking distance to have a project that's competitive. Second, what we saw is there were big jumps in the ridership, percentage-wise, when we went from 11 stations to 12 stations, and actually when we went from 14 stations to 15 stations. So that simple fact alone tells us that there are some performance metrics that are really taking place in serving that commuter service. So we started focusing then on 12 station combinations or 15 station combinations. But at the end of the day, at the end of the conversation, the last criteria is we know that every time we add a station, we get ridership, but at what cost? So what is that benefit for adding a station in comparison to the cost? And we started looking at that clear number really popped out at us is that 12 is the right combination. It is cost effective, it is the performance we need to get a federal project built, to be competitive for federal projects, for federal funding, and it has the appropriate mix of cost benefit. So what we honed in on is 12 stations. Now this is what we took to those working groups. And we had a great conversation, and there's a lot of consensus across all those working groups. They understood the data very well, and they were very comfortable with looking at a combination of 12 stations along the corridor. And if you remember that conversation that I just introduced you about the station spacing, of our goal to be around 2 to 3 miles in station spacing, the RTFP, we're at about 1.3 miles in station spacing. So getting to a number that was about half of the 21 is appropriate. It meets that station spacing goal. The third step was that now that we had a target of the number of stations that we thought made sense, get into the weeds. Let's go station by station. Let's look at the performance of each one of these stations, and let's look for the 5 that we add on to the 7 must-haves to get us to that number of 12, that number that we are seeing technically performs very well. So we have another series of criteria that we applied to the prioritization of stations. It included everything from looking at land use densities and intensities. We were looking at affordable housing, connections to local transit. We actually even did a market evaluation of all 21 stations. And we looked at some real estate trends in each one of those station areas. We looked at the land value, and especially the land value in relationship to the improvements that are upon that land. Because obviously if you have a position where your land value is becoming higher than the facility that sits on it, it's ripe for redevelopment. So that's a good indication of opportunity for transit-oriented development. So with that, we went with those working groups, and we went station by station. And I won't go through every single station, and you can see the ratings here that we identified for each one of these station areas. But with the group, we had some really great conversations. So when we started talking about 22nd Avenue versus 62nd Avenue in Clarence County, we saw from a technical standpoint that we were getting very strong ridership at 22nd Avenue. It's very close to downtown St. Petersburg. But we heard from city staff and from county land use staff that they really liked the opportunity of potentially looking at 62nd Street for a whole host of reasons. There's a great connectivity to the local transit service. There's fantastic opportunities for workforce housing and affordable housing, which is definitely something that I know we're all looking at, and I know it's very important to Pinellas County. So with that dialogue, we understood the technical performance, but for the purpose of our stakeholders, they were leaning more towards moving forward with 62nd Avenue. So it was a great conversation. Similarly, when we jump over to Hillsborough County, we had a great conversation about the stations north of downtown Tampa. This is Flora, Nebraska, MLK, and Waters/Bird. When we looked at Waters and the Bird area, there was consensus across the board. Everyone felt very comfortable that this would be an excellent place to have a station. There's great TOD opportunities, great redevelopment opportunities. You're right next to the river. There's a lot of community assets in that area. And from a technical side, we saw a lot of good performance in there. So right from the beginning, everyone was comfortable with Waters and Bird. But we had this really interesting dialogue to the technical results that we were seeing for Flora, Nebraska, and MLK. We didn't see the ridership that we were expecting. I'll be honest, I was personally surprised. I expected a lot more ridership out of those two stations. And what the truth is what we're seeing from the data is that those station areas, being so close to downtown Tampa, have such a significant amount of local transit service as it is today, is that commuter regional market isn't there. So we're not picking up those commuter rides, which is the purpose of this project. So it was really great to see that sort of vet out through the technical data. We had a good conversation with the working group about that. But ultimately, what we were left with is the understanding that between Bird or Waters area and downtown Tampa, we needed to have some sort of access for the Seminole and Tampa Heights neighborhoods. So we were asked by the Hillsborough Planning Commission Director to go back and revisit that portion of the corridor, potentially adding a 13th station, which is fine. We were comfortable with adding 13 stations versus the 12 targeted, and look for an opportunity to provide good connection that's really going to pick up that commuter service, that fits the purpose of this particular project. So we're continuing that evaluation now, and we're going to bring that back to you in November. Moving farther north, this is jumping north of downtown or the USF area. We had another great
Scott,
concept.
I think Commissioner Kemp wants to ask a quick question.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know whether it's better to ask now, but since you're on it, back to the, those in Tampa, did you say the Planning Commission Director, Melissa
Yes.
Cernino, asked you to look at those?
Yes.
I think that would be a very, I think it should be at Waters and not at the others. So I'll just add that, but I'll talk to the Planning Commissioner,
Very
but I
good.
just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thanks.
So moving further north from the USF area, we're looking at Fletcher and Bears. A very different story from what we were seeing at those two more urban stations closer to downtown. We actually saw more ridership than we expected, and the reality is it's the opposite story, right? Here, there isn't quite as much local transit coverage. There is definitely a commuter market to be served, and we saw the ridership estimates show that and prove that in the data that we were looking at. However, when you look at Fowler, Fletcher, and Bears, they're all very close together, so the conversation from the stakeholders was, let's focus on Bears as that point north of downtown USF, and use that as that ability to start collecting people into the system and providing that regional service. And then, of course, when we look north to Pasco, we saw good performance and great opportunities at both 56 and 54. We had great conversations there.
Is there, okay, you see State Road 54 here?
Yeah, so I'm going to come to that, Commissioner. So what you see here is just a reflection of the technical information and those criteria that we applied in that three-step process. But that's only half of the decision, I believe, moving forward. It's really important that your stakeholders and the input we collected from those stakeholders also provide us that direction. And we've incorporated that, just as I discussed with you this morning. And this is the stations that we're moving forward with right now, heading towards that milestone number 1. So starting from top to bottom, just to make sure that everyone's clearly understands, is we're looking at State Route 54, State Route 56, Bears Avenue, USF area, Waters Bird, the potential for something in between, but if we have further conversations, Commissioner, we can certainly do that. Downtown Tampa, Hines, West Shore, Carillon, 62nd Street in Pinellas, knowing the 22nd there is a backup opportunity moving forward, and then Tropicana Field and 4th Street and St. Pete, which gives us the 13 as we move forward. So from this point, and what we're going to be bringing to you next month is working off those 13 stations, or possibly 12. We're going to start looking at how do we tie those stations together. What are our options from an alignment standpoint? Is it 100% dedicated? Is it 90% dedicated? What are the options there? And we're going to bring that to you in November for your direction. And that, again, allows us to then start having the conversation in early spring, late winter, about the types of stations and really vetting out the TOD opportunities, just like Taryn's going to mention to you today, and really begin looking to move these 5 alternatives into 10% design and ultimately make the request to the federal government to enter into the capital investment grant program. So with that summary, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Scott.
I'm curious if you looked at the new interchange that's coming, it's overpass. It's a little further apart between 56 and 54, and the county actually owns property there. And we have a very large industrial project coming. We own, I think it's 200 acres there, and it's going to be a big work site. So I just wonder if that makes more sense than 54 and 56.
We did have a good conversation about that overpass road. Specifically, the director of Pasco County Transit brought that to our attention. It was something that he was very aware of and very interested in. That is absolutely a possibility. It does add length to the overall corridor, which affects our operating costs and certainly our capital costs if we're trying to put a dedicated lane in there. But these are areas where I think we can continue to remain open as we go through the design process.
Also gets it a little closer to Fernando.
Further north.
Understood.
Members, other questions?
I have a couple of questions. You didn't talk about Hines. And I have concerns about Hines in terms of, I just wondered, it was mentioned yesterday that and I know it's been all along, talking about perhaps locating some of these stations in the center of the interstate, which I think is, from all accounts that I've ever read anywhere, it's, for one, a very inhospitable place, an extremely expensive place, and is not conducive to transit-oriented development. People have to walk into this. And so I wanted to express that, especially in terms of Hines, that I would think it would be a very poor idea to ever consider locating a station in the center of the interstate as opposed to, entering the road and coming back on again at street grade level.
No, great comment, Commissioner. We've been working very closely with the department and working with the TV Next designers to understand exactly what the geometry is. And as I understand it, at this point, we do have the potential to actually come down and get out of the interstate and make a connection that could be either on the north side, where some of those bigger boxes are aging and potential for redevelopment and TOD on the north side of the interstate, or of course on the south side. I drive by it every day. Midtown's coming out of the ground as we speak.
A few other comments. At what point, you originally stated that there would be 9,000 parking spaces associated with this, which, as you know, I've had many concerns about. I, of course, would not like to see any more parking added to downtown Tampa. I don't believe that, I don't see, I'm not sure about the Hines area or the Fletcher, but I certainly would like to see within the city limits of Tampa. I'm very concerned about adding parking or very limited parking. To me, that 80% of people, when they go to transit in an urban area, approach it by walking. And then also concerns in terms of Waters Avenue, because I would not like to see these areas filled with parking garages. And I'm speaking to the city of Tampa. The other places I don't know or pretend to know, but I'd just like to know at what point is that part of what in this process about in terms of the parking garages?
Yeah, it is part of this process, and we're actually going to get into some detail on that. You can expect that in the spring timeframe of next year. We put a placeholder in when we were doing the planning effort for the RTFP. Now that we've got some details and we understand some of these station area potentials, we're going to actually get into a lot more detail. And I'll be honest with you, Commissioner, my personal philosophy to approaching defining these stations is that it is not a one-size-fits-all. We have to go through and look at every station individually, understand the community context in which those stations will exist, and make the right decisions for that community. So if it's at the discretion of this board that there are stations that have zero parking, then that's appropriate for this study.
Finally, I just want to ask, because it's come up here before, this wasn't part of this, but in terms of set aside right-of-way exclusively for bus lanes, and I will say that I was with a group of national experts on these topics a few weeks ago, and I said, do you know any place in the nation where there's a set-aside bus lane on an interstate? And I wondered if they could give me any examples. And no one could, and finally someone said they thought that there was one in the Lincoln Tunnel that has been there for many years and has buses every 5 minutes on it. I'm just saying that it doesn't seem to be a practical, cost-effective option. And so I wanted to bring that up at this time. So, I know the pictures are all showing that, and, we've had discussion of that, but I never thought that that could actually exist, because I frankly figured that if such a thing was set aside, that there would be a lot of public outcry from an area like this.
So I think that's where I mentioned those alternatives, we're going to carry forward. We are going to study that, we're going to evaluate that, whether it's 100% dedicated or some other combination. Directly to your comment, Commissioner, we are breaking new ground in a lot of ways here. This concept for Tampa is on the cutting edge of how you apply bus rapid transit, especially within an interstate environment. But I will point to the fact that we do have this very unique opportunity present to us, and that's the partnership with the Department of Transportation. They are actively looking at modernizing their interstates and have at least informal conversations of interest, including these additional benefits to transit as part of their larger project, which would be actually give us the opportunity to potentially leverage federal highway dollars, not just federal transit dollars. So that partnership alone is unique across the country. So I think we're just kind of looking to exercise that opportunity and find the best path forward. And that'll be part of what we're doing during the PD&E. But you're right, we are actually on the cutting edge of how we apply this particular mode in an interstate environment.
Any further questions?
Start.
Just in doing research on that, I just read that in New York City, they closed 14th Street, very busy street, and it's only open for buses only. And that they're traveling so quickly that people are missing their stops. And it's becoming a great pedestrian corridor as well. So,
Can I just
interesting
clarify,
concept.
what
No, it's not a highway.
Yeah, exactly. And that makes all the difference. There's plenty of places that are really robust bus rapid transit at street grade level, where streets have been set aside, and that's where it makes sense. But that is the major point. It's not an interstate.
Well, I think we're a little hamstrung here, so I think this is our best opportunity.
Well, and I'll be honest with you, the truth of the matter is our region is so woefully behind in how we provide premium transit that we have needs across the board. And this is a solution that really works well with the assets that we have in place today to serve that purpose, provide that commuter regional service. The arterial BRT is an excellent tool as we're looking at providing circulation at the local level. Rail, I love rail, and I would love to see it be brought to this region, and it's part of this pantheon of tools that we have to actually take what has historically been an auto-dominated region and begin migrating into a more modern transportation system.
Now, one question I had to Commissioner Kemp's point about parking, I think that obviously as AVs come on the scene more and more, parking is going to be diminished, possibly even more than we realize now. And I think you have to, when you do set aside parking, you have to also look at the convertibility of that parking to other uses, as it's supplanted by AV technologies that just have a drop off at a station and not a need parking. So I assume you're contemplating that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, we are working close with the department on, specific station areas like the West Shore Intermodal Center, in which we're taking that very much under consideration and providing more space than you would anticipate for the rideshare, microtransit availability, the walk pedestrian as compared to sort of traditional automobile parking.
Members, other questions? Okay, thanks for that, Scott. Now we're going to hear TOD from Terrence Hager.
Good morning, Commissioners. Terrence Sabia, Director for the Florida Center for Community Design and Research, the University of South Florida. And real quickly, for those of you that may not know the Florida Center for Community Design and Research, we are the research arm for the School of Architecture at USF. We were originally founded by the Florida Legislature in 1986 with the mission to assist the citizens of Florida in creating more livable and sustainable communities. So we're really proud of that mission, and we think that now is an excellent time for us to really be engaged with a lot of our local communities based on the topics that we're talking about today. So when we talk about transit-oriented development, there's two key definitions that I want to go over. And I know some of you have seen this presentation before, so I promise to quiz you at the end. But the first is, what is transit-oriented development? And it is dense, compact, mixed-use development near transit that provides access for people to reach amenities, jobs, education opportunities, housing, and more. And the second definition is value capture. So when we look at value capture, we're looking at that proportion and value that transit confers on nearby properties. So as we introduce transit to areas, we typically see properties grow in value. And if we plan and develop in a way, we can actually capture that value and utilize it across a transit system, either for expansion or even maintenance. We did a number of studies looking at case studies from around the country. Some of these studies were BRT, some were rail, but most of them had two components, both TOD and a value capture, that were associated with them. And these are the areas that we thought were most important after going through those studies. So really being able to take hold of best practices. And one of the things that we thought was really key, we put at the top here in our hierarchy, which were those performance-based goals and assigning metrics to those goals. The other piece was really looking at value capture methods and strategies, understanding what those strategies were. Establishing station area design standards. So what are the designs and how do they function within the TOD? Looking at zoning and other land uses for TOD specifically. And then we actually did a conceptual look at some of the TODs throughout 3 counties, Pasco, Hillsborough, and Pinellas. So when we look at performance-based goals, there's several key things that we really want to focus on that we saw coming out of all of the areas around the country that we looked at. So supporting 21st century transit was obviously a key one. The transit component in TOD is really important. The other piece that was coming up quite a bit at the top of the list in the performance base were addressing issues of equity. So advancing equity was a key piece to communities. Mix of uses, leveraging the investment being made in transit and development, creating healthy communities, focusing on affordability and sustainability overall. So that's how communities were really using those performance-based goals and what they were setting. So we're going to look at a couple case studies for these. So the first here is the TBARTA in San Francisco. This is really one of the most robust systems when it comes to performance-based goals. So they have a series of metrics, and they're really looking at quality of life issues, and they have tied numbers to all of them, including looking at value creation and investing in a way that provides value to their community, and also through affordable housing measures. So they have a lot of really great examples to look at. And the second one here is from LA. So what Los Angeles is really focused on is that cost of housing and transportation combined, and looking at ways to reduce those costs through transit-oriented development and setting metrics for that. So LA is a really great case study for us here in the Tampa Bay region in terms of making a transition from being car-dominated into how we can be more transit development focused. And as we look at the value capture piece, we can see, in our little graph, how we start at the bottom. Once transit is announced, those property values start to go up already, as soon as you have a plan. And so that's the time where we need to act. It's not waiting till it starts getting built, it's beforehand. So we want to set up those metrics and our goals and also our value capture strategies ahead of time to be able to take advantage of that capture. So looking at some of those strategies, and you can see some of the typical ones for joint development, developer fees, special assessments. You'll see in the Dallas example where they use tax increment financing. And so those are really some of the measures that we looked at in terms of that value capture opportunity. And again, a few case studies. So Dallas is a great example. Dallas's system, 93 miles. They're looking at over $10.8 billion of economic development across their system. They have 4 different districts, and because of the way they've set up their TIF through their value capture model, you can generate dollars in one district but spend it in another. So instead of being geographically based like our CRAs are here, they can actually use it across an entire system. So that's not only how they improve some of their walkability and bicycle infrastructures, but it's also how they have expanded their system and had maintenance supported through their. Another example for a smaller system, Quincy, Massachusetts, and overall they've used some public-private partnerships, joint development. So this is again just a different model of how to set up value capture overall. They were using development partners in the community to help establish the TODs in their area. And this one, you know, as a background in architecture, is obviously one of my favorites, but the design piece. And this is really important because we want to make sure that we're putting our developments where they're going to have the most benefit for our communities and also be able to drive the most development dollars so that we can support the types of goals and initiatives that we have. So when we talked about that near transit piece for TOD, it's really key that we focus on that first quarter mile around our transit station. That first quarter mile is what we call the 5-minute walk. So it's the most comfortable walk, it's the walk that most people are willing to do, it's also where we see the highest property value and opportunity. That second circle, that half mile, right, this is going to be another pedestrian bicycle supportive zone. This is also going to see development dollars high and rise in this area as well. And then we have that full mile outside, right, which is our transit supported area. So people within this area typically are using these transit modes. So really focusing though on that first quarter mile and half mile are going to be key, and making sure that we're utilizing our land in those areas around our stations to the biggest value possible. And again, a couple case studies here. So Richmond Highway BRT, this is a corridor, it's a dedicated corridor. They were really focused on complete streets, pedestrian scale, and making sure that those elements were built into the overall design of their TOD. The Health Line in Cleveland, another really strong example. This is an example of looking at neighborhood by neighborhood, really context-based solutions to their transit stations, wanting them to fit in and to be able to enhance those communities where they exist. Also focus on the pedestrian scale, but definitely a character-based approach. When we got to zoning, there were a few key pieces that we found when looking at zoning around the TOD stations. So some of the commonalities that we found were definitely in the higher densities, the pedestrian-oriented nature within the transit-oriented development component, an increased mix of uses, making sure that the amenities spread far and wide, and then limited or no parking. And I know that the parking has come up already today, but this was a key piece in a lot of the transit-oriented areas. We find that, you know, they really do have a focus on a mix of being able to walk, bike, utilize local networks for transit and regional networks. And those were key focuses. So again, here's the Pulse Corridor. Pulse Corridor really focuses their zoning around scale. So as the scale of their corridor changes, their zoning adapts to that. And they're looking at how they can create a full system along it. So they really have created a series of priority streets within this corridor. And so by prioritizing certain streets for certain modes and uses, they're really having an effective kind of zoning model. This one is great. Arlington's example here, you can see their TOD rings, right? This is really about that quarter mile, half mile, and they're applying their zoning categories within those. So they've created their own mixed use categories, and they change in density and intensity based on where they are in the neighborhoods that they're addressing. But you can see how these TODs are linked along the system and how they connect as they come along. So we thought as we were going through the study, that it would be important for us to take a look at and see what some of our TOD policies look like here in Tampa Bay. So we looked at FDOT, we looked at Hillsborough's MPO, Pinellas MPO, we looked at City of Tampa, and as many different typologies that we could find. So we took a stab at creating what we thought would be some good examples of how we could look overall at Tampa Bay and start to create a TOD language when it came to zoning and policy. So we have a few typologies. And the first here is going to be our most dense. This is the urban center. So this is really going to be your downtown St. Petersburg, your downtown Tampa, and looking at those high density urban centers. Next is the mixed-use business center. So again, looking at areas like Carillon in the St. Petersburg, Pinellas area, and also looking at the West Shore area in Hillsborough. These are areas that we're seeing begin to start having more residential uses come in, and that's what we want to see, is that mix between the business and retail, commercial sector, and more residential coming in. So that's what's going to help us achieve that mix of uses in these areas. And now the university center. So we have two key university centers, both by USF campuses. So one in the USF St. Petersburg Innovation District and the other in the Innovation District by USF in Tampa. Again, these are going to have a different type of mix of uses, focused on things that tend to relate to startups and other types of businesses around university models, research centers, and things like that. Looking at urban neighborhoods, and we've talked about some of these today too, so 4th Street, St. Petersburg, Florida Avenue and Bird in Hillsborough and the city of Tampa. We have a number of other urban neighborhoods in addition to these, but these are a few examples of how urban neighborhoods begin to really adapt to TOD. Their gridded street networks really make them amenable for TOD development. And then as we look at the suburban neighborhood center, so this is places, even Hyde Park Village in Tampa and Wesley Chapel. These are areas that really can have an activated center. You often see a little more park and ride in these areas as they are more suburban in nature, and so providing people an opportunity to drive in and park and be able to utilize transit from that location. So 4 key questions. So we came up with a few questions that we thought it was important that we asked when looking at transit-oriented development, and value capture opportunities as we move forward in our region. So looking at, have we established goals with measurable outcomes? We found that this was really one of the key components for all of the cities, municipalities, and regions looking at transit, was that they really had good goals and tied metrics to them so that they can see how they were achieving them along the way. And have we identified priority station areas that maximize the return on investment? This is really important because the cheapest piece of property may not be our best opportunity for investment or for capture, right? We want to see the most growth and we want to be able to really take advantage of the investments that we make. Have we established zoning for TOD which leverages value capture strategies? So making sure that our zoning fits and making sure that we're looking at not what it's zoned for now, but what it could be in the future, and making sure that we're tying those together. And have we established design standards which demand walkable, compact developments that will support transit while expressing the unique identity of our communities? And this is a key piece because we want to make sure that we really do take advantage of the transit-oriented development by having that compact, dense development with a lot of amenities there for people. So I'm going to walk through what we did as just very conceptual schematics to test out some of these priorities. So the first one is going to be in Pinellas, Hillsborough, then Pasco. And we also looked at a general station itself. So looking at what some of the key pieces are as we look at stations. So these stations that we've looked at are at the ground level. These are within these existing business centers or urban neighborhoods, and as a way to be able to modify for transit-oriented development. So looking at fixed right-of-way, looking at fare off-board collection for fares, and then real-time arrival and departure information too, right? Making it convenient and easy and something that people can access. So we began looking at existing local transit. So what was available locally for circulation that a regional system could connect to. We felt that was very important. And also looking at, again, that half-mile walking radius and that quarter-mile walking radius. Putting those together with looking at parcels and then block developments. So as soon as we start to begin to divide up land, we can start to see how the grid can form, and then we begin to add and densify it, and we can see a little bit of what it could look like. And again, these are really conceptual. It was meant to be able to show how we could begin to create density and do a transit-oriented development in existing places around local service that could connect to a regional service. And a little bit about what the station might look like from the ground as you connect it in. So again, we really wanted to focus on that idea of the complete street, the mix of uses, the walkability, and that transit is integrated as a major component within that. So our next is in Hillsborough. This is Florida Avenue, Waters, and to the north in Byrd. You can see 275 running through, and we're looking at existing service and also proposed future BRT that we know is being studied. Again, looking at the parcels in the area and the development block patterns. So as we begin to look at those developable blocks, it helps us be able to understand what we're working with and how we can create that gridded street network. And then this is another one where we went ahead and we looked at what that density of development could look like. So focusing mostly within that first quarter mile, there is a lot more opportunity as you start to spread out and you go into the half mile. But we wanted to see how we could really reintegrate within an urban neighborhood, connect some of those street networks and reconnect the grid where it's been disrupted in the past. And a little bit about what that would look like. This is a view from Florida Avenue looking north toward Waters. So again, integrating the street component, integrating the idea of the complete street, walkability. We have a rideshare drop-off location identified in this one. So showing how the street can really integrate transit into a new dense environment. And as we look at Pasco, we can start to see, there's not a local service that comes directly into this area, but we're utilizing the regional connector to help connect at that point. And with the same process of identifying parcels and block developments. And again, just a little bit in terms of adding some density there. And in this area, we really looked at the potential for residential development to be added so that you get that strong mix of uses and being able to retrofit a bit of the parking and to build that up and include more parking structures as part of this overall schematic. And a little bit about what that would look like. So you can see we're stepping down in scale a little and being able to integrate it into the type of scale of development that are within each of these different centers. So I'll leave you with these questions back up, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Members, questions?
Did we get a copy of this?
Yes. Share that.
I don't have a copy. It would be great if you could have, send it to staff and they can email us copies of it.
You got my email?
It wasn't via email. Last Friday.
You have it?
We all got it? Yes, because I wasn't printed out from email.
Yep.
but we will.
Send them again. Mr. Chair.
I just want to say your work is always an inspiration, and it's so great to see this vision on all of this. And I did note that every single of the existing stations that you have, and also the drafts or pictures of the proposed stations, that they're all at street grade level, which I think is extraordinarily important. And also as regards to the parking and when appropriate or not, but thank you, it's just very, very good work.
Thank you. I mean, what the research through the transit-oriented development has really showed is that it's that walkability component that really adds to the overall development potential and the increase in value. And so if we're looking at value capture and tying that to economic development and other opportunities, then that's a key piece. The other key piece is that being able to connect local networks with regional networks really helped increase the use of both regional systems and local, and so that was another thing that we found through the research. So something to definitely consider, and you saw a number of station areas in Scott's presentation that could be very viable for being able to help make those connections.
One quick question I had, we're going to wait for that opportunity is approach, but that should be able to be something you could take station to station.
Yes, absolutely.
I think the neighborhoods that have these stops in them are going to be revitalized, and I wish we had more in our county.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Dave, any comments about future topics?
Not about future topics, but if I could take a moment to provide an executive director report.
Yeah, we didn't have that on there, but that's what I was.
And I'll be brief. I know we are well into your lunchtime. I'll talk fast. But in Vision 2030, the regional TDP, we have launched the Metro Quest survey related to that beginning October that will help prioritize regionally significant transit projects. We have received 234 responses.